Hello, Rob McIver here. Let's talk about adjectival participles, and we're looking at them from the perspective of second year or intermediate students of New Testament Greek. Here is the summary of some of the uses of the participle that I cover in my textbook, Intermediate New Testament Greek Made Easier. And as you can see, participles come in two main categories. First of all, adjectival participles, and secondly, adverbial participles. And this video is about adjectival participles. When we compare adjectival and adverbial participles, the adjectival participles are probably more generally straightforward and easier to translate and understand. And we're going to start with some very easy constructions involving adjectival participles, and we'll move to some fairly complex ones by the time we have finished. The most straightforward use of an adjectival participle is with an article and translated as the one who. For example, ho legon, the one who says; hoi legontes, those who say; hoi agapon, the one who loves; and ho misoun, the one who hates. Now you might fairly ask me, in what way is this an adjectival use? Let's think briefly about an English construction involving an adjective. In this case, the adjective dead. For example, we can say the dead soldier, the dead man, the dead dog. Putting the article the in front of the adjective dead turns the adjective into something like a noun, a substantive if you like. And we find the same pattern in the New Testament with the adjective nekros. Ho huios mu nekros ein, my son was dead. And then, if we put an article in front of nekros, it becomes the dead. And in fact, most of the uses of the adjective nekros in the New Testament is in this form. So we have anekathisin, ho nekros, the dead man sat up. Hoi nekro egerthesonta, the dead will be raised. Egerthe, apo, tone, nekron, he was raised from the dead. And this construction of an article with a participle is found frequently in the New Testament. Here is just a selection from the Gospel of John. Ho erkomenos, the one who comes; ho on, the one who is; ho pisteuon, the one who believes; ho poion, the one who does, and so on. You can run your eye down them. And here are some examples taken from the New Testament epistles. Ho agapon, the one who loves; to hen phronuntos. Now, this is actually a little more complex. Phroneo means to think, be of a mind, have an attitude. And hen, of course, is one. To hen phronuntos, the one way of thinking, the one kind of attitude. And it's very hard to translate that with a participle or a verb in English. The one mind or attitude is what it's usually translated as. And so on. You can, again, run your eye down those. So that is the easiest construction to identify, understand, and translate in the Greek New Testament. What I'm about to show you is that the constructions we usually find for adjectives are mirrored with constructions that are found with participles. And I think it's probably worth our while to do a quick review of the common ways that adjectives are used in the New Testament. For example, we have a noun and an adjective. A noun followed by the adjective is the usual way that the construction is found in Greek. In English, we put the adjective in front of the noun. So, huion agapeton. We don't say son, beloved, well, unless we're writing poetry or using some other flourish of speech. We would say a beloved son. Mu teknon agapeton, my beloved child. Ergon agathon, a good work. Now, some of these are mirrored below. Let's take ergon, agathon, And a phrase that means pretty much the same thing is found first there, ta kala erga, the good works. And as you can see, we have the pattern article, adjective, noun. Ta kala erga, the good works. Tain hagion pollen, the holy city. Ton sututon moskon, the fatted calf. And there's a couple more there for you to look at. Another pattern is to find an article and a noun and an article and an adjective. Instead of the second pattern of article, adjective, noun, which translates very naturally into English, we have the pattern article plus noun followed by article plus adjective. So we have ho huios mu ho agapetos, my beloved son. You'll notice that a very similar phrase is found right at the top in our first set of examples, huion agapeton, a beloved son, as opposed to the beloved son. Or in this case, my beloved son, because we don't say the my beloved son in English, do we? Tain pollen, tain hagion, the holy city. Now you will likely recognize this as something we've already had in the second set, tain hagion pollen. So in the second set, article, adjective, noun. In the third set, article, noun, article, adjective. Ton moskon, ton sututon, the fatted calf. And again, we had a phrase which pretty much means exactly the same thing in the second set where we have article, adjective, noun. Here we have article, noun, article, adjective. And there's a couple more there too for you just to run your eye over. Now, this pattern of noun plus adjective, article, adjective, noun, article, adjective is mirrored with the usage of the adjectival participle. Here are some examples that follow the first pattern we looked at when we were looking at adjective use. So we have a noun plus a participle, or sometimes a participle plus a noun. To phos ergomenos eis ton cosmon, the light coming into the world. And you'll notice it's quite natural to use an English present participle, coming, as the translation of ergomenon. It's used in English in an adjectival manner, and it's used in Greek in a manner rather like an adjective. And you'll no doubt remember when you were first introduced to participles in your first year Greek, that as well as the regular features of a verb, such as tense, mood, and voice, a participle has a case. So we have nominative, vocative, accusative, genitives, and dative, singular and plural, just like an adjective. And they are used in these instances as an adjective. Another example, anthropos, epistelmenos para theo, a man sent by God. Diatheke proskekuromenein hupo to theo. Okay, here may be a couple of words that are new to you, and once we move into the epistles, there is a wider range of vocabulary used. So diathekein means either a will, or if it's between nations, a covenant or treaty. Prokoroo means previously ratified. So, a covenant which has been previously ratified by God. And we're going to come back to Galatians 3:17 because this is a part of quite a complex sentence. Here are some examples of some adjectival participles that follow the pattern that we have noticed already with adjectives in the New Testament. For example, we have an article with a participle plus a noun, just like we had an article, adjective, noun. For example, dia tone apokaluthun tone semaion, by means of the accompanying signs. You'll probably recognize the akaluth from akalutheo, and this is epi akalutho, which means accompanying. Tain melontos orges, the coming wrath. You can see here and in several of the other examples that we can translate this with an English participle, coming, or we can say the wrath which is coming. Use a relative clause instead of an adjectival construction to translate it. Tain melusan doxan, the coming glory, or the glory which is to come. Ho ekon ota, the one having ears. Hoi ekontes gunaikas, those having wives. Ho Melchizedek, ho sunantasas Abraham. Melchizedek, the one who greeted Abraham. So that is the article plus the participle plus the noun. The participle is used clearly as an adjective of that noun, and it agrees with the noun in gender and in case. So this may be the more common way that participles are used with an article and a noun in the New Testament, but there are still a number of uses where you have the pattern article plus noun plus article plus participle. I almost said adjective because that's the pattern that an adjective does as well, isn't it? For example, tes keratos tes dophyses moi, the grace given to me, or the grace which is given to me. To theou to agapesantos me, of the God who loves me. Tone ecclesian to theou tone ouzon ente Judea. Ouzon, a participle of I me. Of the churches of God, those being in Judea. Although, even though we could say that in English, we would usually say those that are in Judea. Tone angelou to diagnuntos moi torta, the angel showing me these things. Again, to, article, angelou, noun, to, article, diagnunontos, participle. And something that just caught my eye, by the way, you'll notice diagnunontos has got two accents. The moi is enclitic and throws the accent back on the previous word if it can accept it. Tas plages tes gigremenos ento biblio tortu, the plagues that have been written in this book. So we see the pattern, article, participle, noun, where the participle is used as an adjective. We see the pattern, article, noun, article, participle. Again, the participle is used as we'd expect an adjective to be used. So these are fairly called adjectival participles. Oh, by the way, before we get to the next slide, you'll notice that I've called these attributive adjectives. An adjective describes an attribute of the noun, and so they are called attributive. There is a use of both adjectives and participles which are described as predicative. In this case, the adjective or the participle forms the predicate of a clause. And in the case of adjectives, the way we tell that it's a predicative adjective is it lacks an article. Let's show you some examples. Kakos ho nomos, the law is good. Where did the is come from? Well, the adjective kalos forms a predicate of a clause involving the law, and we need to add the word is there. We do something similar in English, by the way. Kalos ho nomos, the law is good. Hoitoi, hoi ligoi, pistoi, kai alethenoi. Hortoi, hoi logoi, these words, pistoi kai alethenoi, are faithful and true. So the are faithful and true is the predicate associated with these words. Hortoi, hoi logoi. A very famous example, Makarioi ho tokai. Makarioi hoi tokoi. blessed the poor. Well, blessed are the poor. Or if we were translating it in the manner that the others are translated, the poor are blessed. Oudais agathos. No one is good. And here's a slightly more complex sentence. Ta ga blepomeno proskairai. Ta blepomai. That's the first kind of participle we looked at, the article with a participle. The things that are seen, proskaira, for a time, temporary, transitory. Tada me blepomeno iono. But the things that are not are eternal. Yes. So in fact, this is a little bit naughty putting it here, because we do have two adjectival participles, but they are not used as predicate adjectives. The predicate adjectives of this sentence are actually adjectives proskaira and ionia. You'll notice too that tada me blepontes ionia, we have between ta and blepomeno case de me, a little tiny phrase. And while they're not that common, we do find some examples of predicate adjectival participles. In other words, participles used in a manner similar to the predicate adjective constructions. So we have zoen ga ho logos tu theou. For the word of God is living, and apo pantos adelphou atektos peripatuntos, from a brother who is living irresponsibly. Yes, and so we have to add the word is in there. So while adjectival participles are usually relatively straightforward to understand and translate, some reasonably complex constructions can be made using them. And I've gathered a few examples here. For example, ginoskusen ga nomon lalo. The participle ginoskusen is in the dative case because it is the indirect object of the verb lalo. I speak to those who know. What do they know? The law. For I speak to those who know the law. Another example. Exopistylon ho theos ton huion ortu genomenon ek gunaikos genomenon huponomon. And yes, here we see things in the Greek that we just can't translate into the English. For example, genomenon and genomenon, repeated, is a participle. It's the irregular accusative masculine singular aorist participle middle of ginomai. And we know that ginomai means come into being, become, and has some quite distinctive idiomatic uses like and it happened or it came to pass, etc. So it's going to be challenging to translate that into English. So we have God, ho theos ex epistylon. You can see the aorist of stello. So God sent out his son, and genomenon is the accusative masculine, just like huion, it's adjectival of it. His son who became out of a woman, born of a woman. Genomenon huponomon, who became under the law, who was born under the law. So yes, these are clearly participles used in an adjectival sense, and we can see the connection between genomenon and its antecedent huion. We have several examples of where we have an article and a participle and a noun, and sometimes the middle section there can become not just a participle but a phrase involving a participle. For example, we have hoi oikusa in amoi hamatia. So the noun is hei hamatia. The participle is oikusa from oikeo. Well, oikos is a house, oikeo to live in a house. in emo. So, the sin which lives in me, or the living in me sin. Not really good English, is it? So we go the extra step and make good English out of it, the sin that is living in me. The next example. Epistusen theou tu zoopoiontos tous nekros, kai kaluntus ta me onta hos onta. Well, this is fun, isn't it? And we have several adjectival participles here. So we have they believed, God, the one who makes alive. You can see poieo in there and zoo. They're dead. So they believed in the God who makes alive the dead. Kai kaluntos, and calls those me onta. Our favourite participle, isn't it? The present participle of the verb I me. So ta, neuter, plural, the things that be, and there's a may there, so calling the things that are not being, or how do we say that? Are not, do not have existence. Os onta, as those which do have existence. Well, translated is, he believed the God who makes alive the dead and who calls those things not having being into being. So it's a little more complex, but it's not that terrible once you've sorted out these adjectival participles. They're standing for substantives. They're acting like nouns. This final example is a lot of fun, so let's look at it. Ho meta tetrakosia kai triakonta ete gigonos nomon. Oh, yes. So we have an article with a noun, ho nomos, the law. And we have an adjective, gegonos, again from giname, came into being, has come into being. Meta, after, tetrakosia kai triakonta, 430 years ete. So, the, after 430 years, came into being law. Or translating that really into sensible English, the law which came into being 430 years later. Now let's look at that whole sentence because there's a couple of interesting things happening there. So Galatians 3:17, torta de lego. Oh, that's pretty straightforward. These things I say. Diathekein, pros ke roth menain, hupo tu theo. We started with that example. Ho meta tetrakosia kai triakonta ete gigomenos nomos uk kuroi eis to ket argesai tain epengelien. Okay, so let's keep our wits about us and let's look for the various elements that make up a sentence. A sentence is built around a verb, and there is a verb there. Akuroi means nullify or make void. So uk akuroi does not make null or does not nullify or does not make void. What does not make void? The subject, which is going to be in the nominative case. And we have a noun there in the nominative case, ho nomos. The law does not make void. What's the direct object? In the accusative case, diathekein. The law does not make void a covenant. Let's add the adjectival participles that we've just looked at and let's put them in the order that we need them for an English translation, and probably just to help us understand what's going on as well. So, the subject is ho meta tetrakosia kai triakonta ete gigonos nomos. All right. The law which has come into being 430 years later. The verb, the main verb, the others are adjectival participles of verbs as well, but the main verb, which in this case is in the indicative, uk akuroi, does not nullify what? Diatheken proskekaromenain hupo to theo, a covenant which has previously been ratified by God. Here we have a very creative use of adjectival participles, don't we, to make quite a complex sentence. But it's okay if we keep our wits about us, if we identify the verb, if we identify its subject, and if we identify its direct object. And it has this phrase tacked on the end, eis to katageisai tein epangelion. It's a subordinate purpose clause in order to invalidate the promise. Oh, we've begun with straightforward constructions and we have got to some fairly complex constructions. Do I have any tips to share on how to make adjectival participles easier? Yes, I just so happen to have some. As usual with participles, the first key is to know your principal parts. Now, the principal parts of a verb show what the verb stem does in the various tenses and the active and passive voice. So it goes present, future, aorist, perfect active voice, and perfect and aorist passive voice. And you can find tables of principal parts in an appendix in my book, New Testament Greek Made Easier. And I've divided them into principal parts that you really should know, principal parts that would be good to know, and principal parts that are not found that frequently in the New Testament. So I leave it to you as to how much effort you wish to put into learning them. So once we know the principal parts, we can recognize the tense of verbs. If we have a general idea how participles are formed, we can pretty much identify participles and identify whether they're active or middle or passive. So once we've recognized that it is a participle and know something about it, the first question we ask is it adjectival or adverbial? Now, there is a class of adjectival participles which have an article involved, and if an article is in front of a participle, it almost always means that the participle is going to be adjectival. And it frequently means that the one who is the best translation. Now, if the one who is not the best translation, you ask, what is the antecedent of the participle? What does the participle refer back to? And here it's good to check the gender, the number, and the case. If those don't match, you may need to rethink your identification of the antecedent. If it's adjectival, though, it's always going to be a noun or a pronoun or something that's like a noun, a substantive. Once you've identified it's an adjective, refers back to its noun or pronoun, you then see what the function of the participle is in the sentence. And once you've done that, it usually has fallen into place. You will understand what it's saying and you will have a good idea on how it should be translated. The last thing that helps you understand adjectival participles is lots of practice, isn't it? And one of the features of my book, Intermediate New Testament Greek Made Easier, is that I not only have exercises to give you practice, I also provide questions and answers relating to how participles and other moods of the verb are used in several extended passages from the Greek New Testament. So as you work through these, you will find participles and you will identify several adjectival participles and they will become much more familiar to you. This video has dealt with adjectival participles, and you may be interested in a companion video on adverbial participles. You can most conveniently find this video by clicking the subscribe button below to subscribe to New Testament Greek Made Easier. And hey, if you found this video helpful or interesting, why not click the like button below?